I'm Amber, and I'm 28 years old. My husband Richard just screamed at me for looking like a suburban housewife in front of his business associates. He said I was embarrassing him at my own brother's wedding rehearsal tomorrow. The man who promised to love me forever just told me I'm not good enough to be seen with him in public. 3 hours of getting ready, apparently wasted on someone who thinks I'm beneath him. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely invisible in your own marriage. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me paint you a picture of my perfect life. We live in a mansion worth $2 million. Richard drives a BMW that costs more than most people's houses, and I have a walk-in closet that could house a small family. From the outside, we're the American dream. From the inside? Well, let's just say money can't buy you love, but it can apparently buy you a husband who thinks you're his biggest disappointment. Seriously, Amber? Richard's voice echoed through our marble foyer as I descended the staircase. That dress screams desperate housewife, not successful businessman's wife. I paused halfway down, clutching the banister. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready, choosing a navy cocktail dress that I thought was elegant and appropriate. Apparently, I was wrong. Again. What's wrong with it? I asked quietly, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. He laughed, but not the warm laugh I fell in love with 5 years ago. This was different. Cold, calculated, like everything else about our marriage lately. You look like you're going to a PTA meeting, not networking with the most important investors in the state. Do you have any idea what tomorrow means for my career? Tomorrow, my brother Michael's wedding. The event that should have been about celebrating love had somehow become Richard's personal networking opportunity. Every conversation for the past month had centered around which business deals he could secure, which connections he could make, which investors he could impress. I thought I looked nice, I said, smoothing down the fabric with hands that trembled slightly. Nice? He shook his head like I'd suggested wearing pajamas to the White House. Amber, when you're with me, you're representing my success. Right now, you look completely forgettable. These people notice everything. Your clothes, your makeup, your posture. They judge me based on you. The weight of that statement hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his business card. Maybe I could change into something else? I offered, hating myself for the pleading tone in my voice. Into what? Your entire wardrobe screams safe and boring. You dress like you're trying to disappear instead of trying to impress. He grabbed his keys from the entry table, the Porsche keys that cost more than some people make in a month. You know what? I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to the office to prepare for tomorrow's meetings. But we were supposed to have dinner. I'll eat at the club. Figure out how to look like you actually belong in my world by tomorrow, Amber. Because right now you're a liability I can't afford. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the crystal chandelier above my head. I stood there in my forgettable dress, alone in our perfect house, and wondered when exactly I'd become such a disappointment to the man who once couldn't live without me. I spent the night alone, which was becoming a disturbing pattern in our marriage. Richard's side of the bed remained untouched, cold and perfectly made. By morning, I'd convinced myself that stress was making him say things he didn't mean. The wedding was important to him, and pressure made people act differently. I was wrong about that too. My phone buzzed at 7 a.m. with a text message that would change everything. Won't be attending the wedding. Important client meeting came up. Handle the family questions yourself. R. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding something. He was skipping my brother's wedding. After months of obsessing over the networking opportunities, after making me feel horrible about my appearance because he was so worried about impressions, he was just not coming. I called him immediately. This better be important, Amber. I'm about to go into a crucial meeting. You're not coming to Michael's wedding? I told you, something came up. The Henderson Group wants to discuss a major investment opportunity. This could be the break I've been waiting for. But you said this wedding was crucial for your career. You made me feel terrible about my dress because you were so worried about impressing people. That was when I thought I'd have to bring you. Now I don't have to worry about explanations or damage control. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat on our king-sized bed, still in my silk pajamas, trying to process what had just happened. My husband had essentially told me I was such an embarrassment that he'd rather explain my absence than deal with my presence. For the first time in our 5-year marriage, I wondered if Richard actually loved me, or just loved having a wife who didn't ask inconvenient questions. I spent 2 hours getting ready, choosing a burgundy dress I'd bought but never worn because Richard had called it too attention-seeking. Looking at myself in the mirror, I realized something profound. I looked beautiful. More than beautiful, I looked confident. When had I stopped trusting my own judgment about my own reflection? At the church, my mother immediately noticed Richard's absence like a bloodhound detecting scandal. Where's your husband, sweetheart? Work emergency, I lied smoothly. the deception rolling off my tongue easier than I expected. She frowned, her perfectly penciled eyebrows drawing together. On your brother's wedding day? What could be so important? You know how demanding his job is, Mom. He would have been here if he could. But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. When had Richard's excuses started sounding hollow? When had I started making excuses for his excuses? The ceremony was beautiful. Michael looked handsome in his tuxedo. Jessica was radiant in her grandmother's vintage lace, and their vows were the kind that made everyone cry happy tears. Everyone except me. I spent the entire ceremony wondering why my husband's promises felt like ancient history while theirs felt like a beginning. During the reception, I fielded questions about Richard's absence with practiced ease, but each explanation felt like a small betrayal of myself. I was covering for a man who thought I was beneath him, protecting the reputation of someone who couldn't be bothered to protect mine. The reception was held at the country club where Richard and I had our own wedding 5 years ago. Walking through those doors brought back memories of a day when I genuinely believed I was the luckiest woman alive. Richard had been attentive, charming, proud to introduce me to everyone. He'd whispered sweet things in my ear during dinner and held my hand like he never wanted to let go. Now I couldn't remember the last time he'd looked at me like I was anything more than an inconvenience. I found my assigned table and was relieved to see Sarah, my college roommate, along with a few other friends I hadn't talked to in months. Adult friendships were hard to maintain when your husband considered your social life a waste of time. "You look absolutely stunning," Sarah exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. "That color is perfect on you. Where's Richard?" "Business meeting," I said, the lie getting smoother with practice. "On a Saturday? That man works way too hard." I nodded and changed the subject, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was wondering where my husband was. At least that's what I thought until I overheard two women talking at the bar during cocktail hour. "Isn't that Richard Coleman's wife? She's here alone again." "I heard they've been having problems. My husband works with him, and Richard's been saying some concerning things lately at the office." "What kind of things?" "That he feels trapped in his marriage. That he married too young and didn't know what he really wanted. That his wife doesn't understand the level he's trying to reach professionally." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach with a sledgehammer. Richard had been discussing our marriage problems with his colleagues, telling them he felt trapped, making me sound like an anchor dragging down his success. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I locked myself in a stall and tried not to let my expensive mascara run down my cheeks. When had I become the kind of woman who hid in bathroom stalls at family celebrations? When I finally composed myself and returned to the reception, my brother Michael intercepted me near the dessert table. "Hey, there's my beautiful sister. Having a good time?" "The best," I said, forcing a smile that felt like plastic surgery. "Everything is absolutely perfect, Michael. You and Jessica look so happy." "We are happy. But are you okay? You seem, I don't know, different somehow." "Just tired. It's been a long week with all the wedding preparations." He studied my face with the protective intensity that only big brothers possess. "Amber, if something's wrong, you know you can talk to me, right? I know I've been distracted with wedding planning, but I'm still your brother. That comes first." For a moment, I almost broke down and told him everything about the constant criticism, the loneliness, the feeling that I was slowly disappearing in my own marriage, about overhearing those women discuss my husband's complaints about being trapped with me. But this was his wedding day, and I wasn't going to ruin it with my problems. "I'm fine, really. Go dance with your gorgeous wife." He squeezed my shoulder and walked away, but I could see he wasn't convinced. I spent the rest of the reception making small talk and pretending everything was wonderful while my marriage crumbled around me like a house of cards in a hurricane. I left early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely false, and drove home to our empty mansion where Richard's absence felt like a third person in every room. Sunday arrived with still no sign of Richard, and I spent the day moving through our house like a ghost haunting her own life. I cleaned rooms that were already spotless, organized closets that didn't need organizing, and tried not to check my phone every 30 seconds for messages that never came. By evening, I was alternating between worry and rage in 5-minute intervals. At 7 p.m., I heard his key in the lock like the sound of impending doom. "Where have you been?" I asked as he walked into our designer kitchen, trying to keep my voice level. "Working. I told you that." He opened our stainless steel refrigerator and pulled out a beer, not making eye contact like I was a stranger he was trying to avoid. "For 36 hours straight? It's a complicated deal, Amber. You wouldn't understand the intricacies involved in high-level business negotiations." There it was again, the subtle dismissal wrapped in condescension, the implication that I was too simple to grasp his important adult world. "Try me." He sighed like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. "The Henderson Group is considering a massive investment in my firm. We're talking about tens of millions in new capital. I can't afford any distractions or mistakes. Your wife attending her brother's wedding is a distraction? When she shows up looking like... He gestured vaguely at my casual Sunday clothes. Never mind. The point is, some things are more important than social obligations. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, normal clothes for a Sunday at home, but under Richard's critical gaze, I felt slovenly and inappropriate. Richard, we need to have a serious conversation about what's happening between us. Nothing's happening between us. You're being overly dramatic about normal marriage challenges. I heard people at the wedding talking about our problems, about you feeling trapped. His beer bottle stopped halfway to his lips, and for just a moment, I saw something that looked almost like guilt flicker across his features. You were eavesdropping on private conversations? I was existing in the same space as people who apparently know more about my marriage than I do. What have you been telling your colleagues about our relationship? Look, I may have mentioned that things have been challenging lately. Marriage is hard work, Amber. Not everyone understands the pressures I'm under. What kind of challenges, exactly? He set down his beer and finally looked at me directly, his blue eyes cold as winter water. You want brutal honesty? Fine. You've gotten comfortable. You don't take care of yourself the way you used to. You dress down. You've gained weight. You're content to just exist instead of trying to grow or improve yourself. Each word hit like a physical slap. I've gained 5 pounds, Richard. 5. It's not just the weight. It's your entire attitude. You used to try to impress me, to be worthy of what I could offer you. Now you act like just showing up is enough effort. Showing up should be enough. I'm your wife, not your employee or your trophy. But you are my trophy, whether you like it or not. When we're out together, people judge my success based on you. And lately, I haven't been proud of what they see. The silence that followed was deafening. We stood in our granite and marble kitchen, surrounded by evidence of wealth and success, and I felt poorer than I'd ever felt in my life. I think I need some space to process this, I said quietly. Space from what? This conversation? Space from you. For the first time all weekend, Richard looked genuinely surprised, like it had never occurred to him that I might have limits to what I would tolerate. That was his first mistake. His second mistake was what he did the next day. I spent that night in our guest room, staring at the ceiling and replaying 5 years of marriage like a highlight reel of my own diminishing self-worth. When had Richard's suggestions become demands? When had his criticism become constant? When had I become someone who apologized for disappointing him instead of someone who expected to be cherished? The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to start living like the person I used to be, instead of the person Richard was trying to make me become. I called my college friend Megan and suggested lunch, something I hadn't done in months because Richard always found reasons why I should stay home instead of wasting time with friends who weren't advancing my life in any meaningful way. You look exhausted, Megan said when we met at our favorite cafe downtown. Everything okay in paradise? I almost gave my standard everything's wonderful response, but something in her genuinely concerned expression made me pause. Can I ask you something honestly? Do you think I've let myself go since I got married? She nearly choked on her salad. What? Amber? You're gorgeous. You always have been. Why would you even ask something like that? Richard thinks I've gotten too comfortable, that I don't try to impress him anymore. Richard thinks a lot of things that are completely insane. Remember when he told you that volunteering at the animal shelter was beneath your social status? Or when he said reading fiction was a waste of intellectual energy? I'd forgotten about both of those comments, but now they came rushing back along with dozens of others. The slow, steady erosion of my confidence disguised as helpful suggestions. He's not wrong about everything, I said defensively, still protecting him even as he destroyed me. I have gained some weight, and I don't dress up as much as I used to. Amber, you've been married for 5 years. You're supposed to be comfortable with each other. That's called intimacy, not laziness. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Can I tell you something that might be hard to hear? You've changed since you married him, and not in good ways. You used to be confident, funny, spontaneous. You had opinions about everything and weren't afraid to share them. Now you second-guess every word that comes out of your mouth. Her words hit harder than Richard's criticism because they rang true in a way that terrified me. What am I supposed to do? He's my husband. I love him. Does he love you? The real you? Not some polished version he's trying to create? I couldn't answer that question, which was answer enough. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself, not for Richard's approval. I bought a dress that made me feel beautiful, shoes that made me feel confident, and perfume that I loved regardless of whether he would approve. When I got home, Richard was in his office on a conference call. I could hear him laughing with whoever was on the other end, The warm, genuine laugh that I rarely heard anymore when he was talking to me. I hung my new dress in the closet and wondered when I'd have the courage to wear it. I didn't have to wait long to find out. The courage came sooner than expected, in the form of the worst betrayal imaginable. 3 days before Michael's wedding, everything changed. Richard had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. Something he never did because he was paranoid about business security. But there it was, unlocked and displaying his email inbox like a roadmap to my destruction. I almost walked away. I almost respected his privacy and minded my own business like a good wife should. But something about the subject line of the top email made my blood freeze. Can't wait to see you at the wedding. S. Stephanie, his college ex-girlfriend, the woman he'd dated for 3 years before me, the one he claimed he'd lost touch with completely. I clicked on the email thread before I could stop myself, and what I found destroyed me completely. Months of correspondence, intimate conversations, complaints about me that made my stomach turn. Amber has no appreciation for the finer things, he'd written. She's content with mediocrity when I need someone who matches my ambition. Stephanie's response was even worse. You deserve someone who enhances your success rather than holding you back. Richard, someone who understands what you're building. But the worst part was the planning. They weren't just talking about our marriage problems. They were planning to meet at Michael's wedding. Looking forward to finally seeing you Saturday, Stephanie had written. It's been far too long since we were in the same room. Richard's response made me physically sick. Can't wait. It'll be refreshing to spend time with someone who actually understands what I'm trying to accomplish. Someone who appreciates ambition instead of fighting it. I screenshot everything before closing the laptop, my hands shaking with a combination of rage and humiliation that I'd never experienced before. But the planning didn't stop there. They had discussed the guest list, figured out who would be there, even coordinated their stories about how they'd reconnected professionally. My husband wasn't just having an emotional affair with his ex-girlfriend. He was planning to parade her around at my brother's wedding while making me look like the clueless wife who didn't suspect anything. I spent that night lying awake next to Richard, wondering how long he'd been planning this betrayal, how long he'd been using my family's connections while secretly despising everything about me, how long I'd been living with a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his happiness. But here's the thing about betrayal. Sometimes it doesn't break you. Sometimes it wakes you up. The next morning, I went shopping again. Not for just any dress this time. I bought the most beautiful, confidence-boosting, show-stopping dress I could find. If Richard wanted to bring his mistress to my brother's wedding, I was going to make sure she knew exactly what he was losing, because I had something Richard didn't know about, something that was going to make his little affair the most expensive mistake of his life. Our prenuptial agreement had an infidelity clause, and I was about to use it to destroy him completely. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that completely changed your perspective on someone you loved? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship. The morning of Michael's wedding arrived like Judgment Day. I woke up alone, which had become our new normal, and spent an hour getting ready like I was preparing for battle. Because in a way, I was. I put on the emerald green dress I'd bought specifically for this day, the one that made my eyes look incredible and my figure look amazing. I did my hair in loose curls that framed my face perfectly, and I applied makeup with the precision of a war paint artist. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the woman I used to be before Richard systematically destroyed my confidence. I looked beautiful. More than beautiful. I looked powerful. Richard took one look at me and lost his mind. Are you out of your damn mind with that dress? You look like you're trying to upstage the bride. It's green, Richard. Jessica's dress is white. I'm hardly competing with her. It's too much. Too flashy. Too obvious. He was pacing around our bedroom like a caged animal. These people can smell desperation, Amber. You're going to embarrass both of us. Desperation. There was that word again. Apparently looking confident was now a character flaw in Richard's book. What exactly am I being obvious about? That you're trying way too hard to prove something. You look like a woman having a midlife crisis, not like someone who belongs at a sophisticated social event. I stared at this man who had been systematically destroying my self-worth for months while secretly planning to replace me with his ex-girlfriend. The man who thought I was too stupid to figure out his scheme. You know what, Richard? You're absolutely right. I am trying to prove something. His pacing stopped. What? That I'm not going to let you make me feel worthless anymore. His face turned red with the kind of anger that used to make me apologize immediately. Your attitude lately has been completely unacceptable, Amber. This isn't confidence. This is you acting out because you know you don't belong in my world. Your world? You mean the world where husbands lie to their wives and sneak around with ex-girlfriends? The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Stephanie Martinez. I'm talking about months of emails planning your little reunion at my brother's wedding. I'm talking about you thinking I'm too stupid to figure out that you've been having an affair. He sat down heavily on our bed, all the fight gone out of him. Amber, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been emotionally cheating on me for months, planning to humiliate me at a family event and lying to my face about everything. It wasn't physical. Oh, well, that makes it so much better. You only betrayed me emotionally and planned to parade your mistress around in front of my entire family. She's not my mistress. Then what is she? Richard? Your business consultant? Your life coach? Your upgrade? He couldn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice deadly calm. You're going to go to this wedding. You're going to smile and pretend to be a loving husband, and you're going to pray that I don't decide to tell everyone exactly what kind of man you really are. And if I don't, then you'll find out exactly what the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement means. I walked out of the room and left him sitting there, probably trying to figure out how much his betrayal was going to cost him. He had no idea he was about to lose everything. The wedding ceremony was perfect. Michael looked handsome and nervous. Jessica was radiant in her grandmother's vintage lace, and their vows were the kind that made everyone believe in love again. Everyone except me. I spent the entire ceremony scanning the crowd for Stephanie's face, wondering when Richard would spring his surprise. He played the part of devoted husband beautifully during the ceremony, sitting beside me, even holding my hand during the vows. To anyone watching, we looked like the perfect couple. But I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a fever. You look beautiful, he whispered during the recessional, probably for the benefit of the people sitting behind us. Thank you, I whispered back. So will your girlfriend when she arrives. His grip on my hand tightened painfully, but his smile never wavered. The reception was held at the most exclusive country club in the city, with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the golf course. 200 guests celebrating love while my marriage died a public death. I spent cocktail hour working the room like a politician, talking to family friends, college buddies, and business associates with a smile plastered on my face. But I was really hunting, looking for the brunette who was about to destroy whatever was left of my marriage. I found her during dinner. Stephanie Martinez was even more beautiful than her photos suggested. Tall, elegant, with the kind of bone structure that belonged on magazine covers. She was wearing a stunning red dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, and she was standing near the bar talking to my cousin David like they were old friends. She didn't see me approaching, but David did. Amber, come meet my new friend Stephanie. She just moved back to town and was telling me about her work in corporate consulting. Stephanie, I said warmly, extending my hand. How lovely to meet you. I'm Amber, the bride's sister-in-law. She shook my hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Of course. I've heard so much about you. Have you? That's interesting, since I've never heard of you at all. David excused himself with the survival instincts of someone who recognized female warfare, leaving us alone at the bar. You're Richard's wife, she said, and it wasn't a question. I am. And you're Richard's… what, exactly? Business associate? Old friend? Something else entirely? We have a complicated history. I'm sure you do. Complicated enough that he felt the need to hide it from his wife? She had the grace to look uncomfortable. I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Oh, there's no misunderstanding. I've read every email, Stephanie. I know exactly what you two have been planning. Her composure cracked just slightly. I see. Do you? Because I'm not sure you understand the position you've put yourself in, coming to my family's wedding as the other woman. That takes either tremendous courage or tremendous stupidity. I was invited. By whom? She couldn't answer that. Because we both knew Richard hadn't officially invited her anywhere. Here's what's going to happen, I said. My voice conversational, but my eyes probably shooting daggers. You're going to enjoy your dinner, you're going to dance if you want to, and then you're going to leave, quietly, without causing a scene. And if I don't, then you'll find out exactly how messy public confrontations can get when there's this much money involved. That's when Richard appeared at my elbow like he'd been watching us from across the room. Amber, he said carefully, I see you've met Stephanie. We were just getting acquainted, I said sweetly. Weren't we, Stephanie? The three of us stood there in a triangle of tension while the party continued around us, and I realized this was the moment everything would change forever. Why don't we step outside? Richard suggested, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. We can discuss this privately. Discuss what? I asked innocently. I was just meeting your friend Stephanie, though I have to say, it's interesting that you never mentioned knowing anyone here tonight. Stephanie looked between us like a tennis spectator watching a particularly vicious match. Perhaps I should give you two some privacy. Oh no, I said firmly. Don't leave on my account. I'm fascinated to hear how you two know each other. The three of us walked out to the garden terrace, away from the reception, but still within sight of the floor-to-ceiling windows. I wanted witnesses to whatever was about to happen. Amber, let me explain, Richard started. Please do. I'm dying to hear this. Stephanie and I dated in college. We reconnected recently through business. It's completely innocent. Innocent? I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Is that what you call months of planning to meet at my brother's wedding? Is that what you call telling her that I'm holding back your success? Stephanie's eyes widened. She clearly hadn't expected me to be so well-informed. You read private correspondence, Richard accused. You left your laptop open, genius. And those private conversations were about my marriage, which makes them my business. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been having an emotional affair. You brought your mistress to my family's wedding, and you thought I was too stupid to figure it out. She's not my mistress, Richard protested, but his face was turning red. Then what is she? Your career counselor? Your life coach? Your test drive for wife number 2? Stephanie finally found her voice. We're just friends, Amber. We've been catching up. Nothing more. Friends who plan secret meetings at weddings? Friends who discuss how disappointed he is in his current wife? That's an interesting definition of friendship. I pulled out my phone and showed them both the screenshots I'd taken of their email thread. Richard's face went white. Here's the thing, both of you. I don't really care what your relationship is or isn't. What I care about is that you thought you could humiliate me at my own family's wedding. That wasn't our intention, Stephanie said. Wasn't it? You coordinated your stories, figured out the guest list, planned your little reunion down to the last detail. What exactly did you think would happen when people saw Richard with a beautiful woman who isn't his wife? People would think we're business associates, Richard said weakly. People would think exactly what they're thinking right now, that my husband is cheating on me. I gestured toward the windows where several wedding guests were indeed watching our heated conversation with great interest. So here's what's going to happen. You're both going to walk back into that reception and act like nothing happened. You're going to stay on opposite sides of the room, and at the end of the night, you're going to leave separately and never contact each other again. And if we don't? Stephanie asked. Then I'll make sure everyone in that room knows exactly what you've been planning, starting with the wedding videographer who's been filming everything tonight. Richard grabbed my arm. Amber, you're overreacting. Let's go home and discuss this rationally. Oh, we're definitely going to discuss this, but not here and not with her present. I shook off his grip and smiled at both of them. Enjoy the rest of the wedding. It's going to be the last party you attend together. But I was wrong about that. Because what happened next would make this conversation look like polite small talk. We stayed at the reception for another 2 hours, playing our roles like actors in the world's most dysfunctional theater production. Richard stuck to my side like glue, probably afraid of what I might say to whom. Stephanie mingled carefully, staying far away from us but close enough that I could feel her presence like a toothache. I danced with my brother, made small talk with relatives, and smiled until my face hurt. But underneath the performance, I was calculating, planning, preparing for the confrontation that would end my marriage. You seem different tonight, my brother Michael observed during our dance. More, I don't know, focused? It's been an enlightening evening, I said, watching Richard watch me from across the room. Everything okay with you and Richard? He looks like he swallowed something unpleasant. I think he's about to, I said. And Michael raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. When the reception finally ended, Richard and I drove home in complete silence. The tension in the car was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. He kept glancing at me like I was a bomb that might explode at any moment. He wasn't wrong. We pulled into our circular driveway, and Richard finally spoke. Amber, I know you're upset, but we can work through this. Can we? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning to replace me for months. That's not true. Isn't it? Let me ask you something, Richard. When exactly were you planning to tell me about Stephanie? Before or after you filed for divorce? His silence was deafening. We walked into our house, and Richard immediately went into damage control mode. Look, I admit I handled this badly, but nothing physical happened between us. We're just friends who have history. Friends don't plan secret meetings at family weddings. Richard, it wasn't secret. We were just going to see each other at a social event. Without telling your wife. That's literally the definition of secret. He sat down heavily on our white leather sofa, and for the first time he looked genuinely defeated. What do you want me to say, Amber? That I've been unhappy? That I've been questioning our marriage? Fine. I have been. Thank you for finally being honest. But that doesn't mean I want a divorce. It doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means you love the idea of someone else more. That's not fair. You know what's not fair, Richard? Finding out your husband thinks you're a disappointment by reading his emails to another woman. Finding out he's been planning to parade his ex-girlfriend around at your brother's wedding. Finding out that the man you've been trying so hard to please thinks you're not worth the effort. I never said that. You said I was holding back your success. You said I didn't appreciate the finer things. You said you needed someone who matched your ambition. What exactly did you mean by all that? He couldn't answer, because we both knew what he'd meant. Here's the thing, Richard. You were right about one thing. I have been holding back your success, but not in the way you think. What do you mean? I mean that for 5 years. I've been supporting your career, managing your social obligations, and making you look good to everyone who matters. And I've been doing it while you've been tearing me down piece by piece. That's not what I was doing, isn't it? When was the last time you complimented me without following it with a criticism? When was the last time you supported something I wanted to do? When was the last time you treated me like a partner instead of an employee? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I want a divorce, Richard. His face went completely white. Amber, please, don't make any decisions you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not making this decision sooner. You don't understand what you're saying. The prenup? Oh, I understand the prenup perfectly, especially the infidelity clause. And that's when he realized how much trouble he was really in. Richard's face went through several color changes, white to red to gray to green, as the implications of what I'd said sank in. The infidelity clause? He repeated weakly. Section 7 of our prenuptial agreement, Richard. The one your lawyer insisted on including to protect your assets in case I ever cheated on you. Funny how these things work out. I didn't cheat on you. Nothing physical happened with Stephanie. Emotional infidelity counts, and we both know it. Months of intimate correspondence with another woman, planning secret meetings, discussing your dissatisfaction with your current wife. That's adultery in the eyes of the law. No court would enforce that clause based on a few emails. A few emails. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling. I count 47 separate conversations over 6 months. Discussions of your unhappiness in our marriage. Plans to meet at family events. Stephanie encouraging you to follow your heart and find someone who deserves your success. I looked up at him with the kind of smile that probably made serial killers nervous. Want me to read some of the more intimate parts out loud? The part where you told her you think about her when you're lying next to me? The part where she said she never should have let you go? Richard's breathing was getting shallow and rapid. Amber, please. Think about what you're doing. If you invoke that clause, I lose everything. The business, the house, the investments. Everything I've worked for. Yes, you do. That would destroy me. Good. You can't mean that. I absolutely mean that. You spent months planning to humiliate me, Richard. You brought your mistress to my brother's wedding. You've spent our entire marriage making me feel like I'm not good enough for you. Now you get to find out what losing everything feels like. He stood up and started pacing again, his panic increasing by the minute. Amber, I'll end things with Stephanie completely. We'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. What I want is for you to experience the same humiliation you put me through. What I want is for you to lose everything you think makes you important. What I want is for you to find out what it feels like to not be good enough. Please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. Begging? That's interesting. I don't remember you being concerned about my feelings when you were telling Stephanie how disappointing I am. I was angry. I didn't mean those things. You meant every word. The only thing you didn't mean were your wedding vows. That's when it really hit him. The business he'd built, the lifestyle he'd cultivated, the social status he'd worked so hard to achieve, all of it was about to disappear because he couldn't keep his heart faithful to his wife. This will ruin completely, he whispered. Yes, it will. Just like you've been trying to ruin my self-worth for months. His breathing became even more labored, and sweat was beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. I can't breathe properly. That's called panic. Richard, it's what happens when you realize your actions have consequences. Amber, I think I'm having a heart attack. He grabbed his chest and collapsed onto the marble floor of our foyer, gasping for air like a fish out of water. I stood there looking down at him, and for just a moment, I felt a flicker of concern. Then I remembered the months of criticism, the secret emails, the plan to humiliate me at my brother's wedding. I called 911. My husband appears to be having some kind of medical emergency, I told the dispatcher calmly. He's conscious but having difficulty breathing. As we waited for the ambulance, Richard looked up at me from the floor. Please, he gasped. Don't destroy me. You destroyed yourself, Richard. I'm just filing the paperwork. The paramedics arrived within minutes and determined he was having a panic attack, not a heart attack. They loaded him onto a stretcher anyway for observation at the hospital. Are you riding with him? One of the EMTs asked. I looked at my husband strapped to a gurney, probably trying to figure out how much his betrayal was going to cost him. Yes, I said. Someone needs to be there when he gets the final diagnosis. The ride to the hospital was surreal. Richard was conscious but sedated, and I sat beside him thinking about how we'd gotten to this point. 5 years of marriage reduced to this. Him on a stretcher, me contemplating divorce papers, and his mistress probably wondering why he wasn't answering her texts. At the hospital, they ran tests and confirmed what the paramedics suspected. Panic attack brought on by acute stress. Richard would be fine physically. Emotionally and financially, that was another story entirely. While the doctors were running their final tests, something interesting happened. Richard's phone, which had fallen out of his pocket during the collapse, started buzzing with notifications. Since he was technically unconscious and I was his emergency contact, I took the liberty of checking his messages. What I found was better than Christmas morning. Photos, videos, text messages going back months. Not just with Stephanie, but evidence of actual meetings, hotel receipts, restaurant bills where they'd had intimate dinners. Everything I needed to prove that their relationship had definitely crossed the line from emotional to physical. I forwarded everything to my personal email before the nurses returned his belongings. When Richard was finally discharged at 3 in the morning, I drove him home in silence. He was groggy from the medication, but aware enough to know he was in serious trouble. Amber, we need to talk about this rationally. No, Richard, we don't. You need to talk to your lawyer. I need to talk to mine. And Stephanie needs to find a very good therapist. The next morning, while Richard slept off his medication, I made the phone call that would change everything. I need to file for divorce, I told the state's most expensive family law attorney, and I need to invoke an infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement. How strong is your evidence? Strong enough to end his career and take everything he owns. By the end of the week, Richard had lost it all. The infidelity clause held up perfectly in court, especially with the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. His business, our house, the cars, the investments. Everything became mine. Stephanie, it turned out, had her own problems. She was married to a very wealthy, very vindictive man who didn't appreciate his wife's extracurricular activities. Her divorce was even messier than ours. Richard tried to fight the prenup, claiming emotional distress and arguing that the clause was unfair. But his own emails proved premeditation and a pattern of deception that made him look like exactly what he was, a cheating husband who got caught. 6 months later, I was running the company Richard had built, which had technically been half mine anyway. I'd lost 20 pounds, updated my wardrobe, and was dating a wonderful man who thought my business acumen was impressive rather than threatening. The best part? I kept the house. Richard's dream house, with its marble counters and crystal chandeliers, became my sanctuary. Every morning, I wake up in our former bedroom and remember that I'm worth more than someone who made me feel worthless. Richard moved into a 1-bedroom apartment and took a job working for someone else. Stephanie moved back to her hometown after her husband took everything in their divorce. Sometimes I see Richard around town. He looks older, tired, diminished. Sometimes he tries to make eye contact, probably hoping for forgiveness or reconciliation. I look right through him. Because here's what I learned. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. And when someone tries to make you feel small, remember that you have the power to make them feel even smaller. The 3 words I told Richard that night: you lose everything. And he did. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more real-life lessons about standing up for yourself when people try to diminish your worth. Remember, documentation is power, self-respect is priceless, and sometimes karma just needs a really good lawyer. Thanks for listening. And remember, never let anyone convince you that you're not good enough. You are enough exactly as you are.